Psalm 127, verse 1 says, "Unless the Lord builds a house, its builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over a city, the watchmen stay alert in vain." If you listened to last week's announcement, you know there are concerns that several of the members have in regards to how I've been leading the church and how it's been structured. As I said this past week, I think a lot of those concerns are a result of a very big misunderstanding, for which I take complete and full responsibility. So this week what I want to do is I want to answer some of the why questions. Why is Dan so involved in everything? Why are so many of the church's decisions made by a small group of people? Why don't we hold more congregational votes? So as I share with you today and kind of try to give you the why behind it all, please know I'm not coming to you from a defensive posture by any means. I'm doing this in an attempt to replace confusion with clarity. In short, why am I pastoring Rock and Refuge Church in a way that is so very different than the manner in which a lot of you are used to and have grown up with? The simple answer to this question is because I told you I was going to. The problem with the simple answer is many of you didn't really totally understand and grasp some of that when I was trying to explain it back in July of last year. And when you hired me to be your pastor. And for that, that is all on me. That is completely my fault for not doing a good enough job of explaining to the congregation how different that kind of style of church structure looks from what a lot of you are accustomed to. So that is why we're hitting the reset button as an entire church body right now. Because it's not fair for me to force an elder-led model of church on all of you because of a vote you made last year, especially if I didn't do a good enough job of explaining it at the time. So let me back up a bit and try to give you a little bit of an explanation of what an elder-led church looks like and do a much better job than I did last time, so you all have a little bit better perspective and picture of what we've been doing and why. So earlier yesterday, I emailed out our church structure document. I'm sorry, Linda, I meant to bring you a copy and I did not because I know you don't have email. I will get you a copy though. But what it basically did is just outline what we've been doing so far, right? This isn't what we're going to continue to do. It simply said, as of now, this is how Rock and Refuge Church has been operating for a while. So, but what we're doing is we're looking to move away from the structure and into something different. The structure we've been using so far is what I'm going to call elder-ish. It's an elder-ish church structure. It's not really a perfect match. You see, what we've done is the leadership team at Rock and Refuge Church has functioned very similarly to how the elder board functioned where I served at Grace before I came here. It's not a perfect match, which is why I call it elder-ish. You see, I spent several years at Grace Fellowship Chapel. My last 2 years there, I was brought onto the elder board to serve as an elder. And during that time, we had either 5 or 6 male elders, one of which was the pastor of the church, and the rest were people from the congregation that had been elected to serve on the elder board. Here at Rock and Refuge Church, we're a little different. We have one male elder, that would be me, and we have several very godly women that serve on the leadership team along with me. And so we've been trying to somewhat mimic the structure that you would have in an elder-led church. So how does an elder-led church function? Let's take a little bit of a look at that and see how it works. First off, let's look at what is an elder in the first place. If we're talking about an elder-led church, what is an elder? Now, in the Bible, we see 3 different words that refer to the same office. We see elder, we see overseer, and we see pastor. Sometimes you see all 3 of these in the same passage describing the same office. And so they're one and the same. They refer to different facets of the position, right? So elder refers to the dignity and standing of the position. If you think all the way back to Old Testament times when Moses was overwhelmed because he was trying to do everything and they were like, no, you need some help. You need some other people to help you. So they had elders from every tribe assist Moses. It was the elders. They were the ones that had dignity and standing and were looked up to within the community. They were the ones that served along with him. So the term elder refers to the dignity and standing and usually refers to the fact that the person is older as well. The second term, overseer, and the third term, pastor, they both talk about the function of the position, okay, the function. So overseer speaks to the fact that the elder oversees and teaches the flock, that is part of his job with the congregation is to oversee and teach the congregation. And pastor is the same thing. The pastor is to shepherd and lead and guide the congregation more and more toward Jesus, more and more toward looking like him. So what is an elder? An elder is an overseer and a pastor. A pastor is an overseer and elder. An overseer is a pastor and an elder. The three terms we see in the New Testament all describe the exact same position and speak to different facets of that position. So the next question is, who can be an elder? How do you get to the point where you come on and you become an elder in a church? Well, the nice thing is that Paul gave us very specific specifications for what was expected of someone who would be elected as an elder. There are 3 letters in the New Testament we call pastoral letters: 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, and Titus. And these are all letters that are written to different pastors that are pastoring churches, and so Paul sends them letters and instructions for how to lead and guide their church. Timothy is leading the church in Ephesus at the time, so Paul sends 2 letters to him. Titus is the head of the church in Crete. It's a small island off the coast. And so in 1 Timothy chapter 1, verses 3 through 7, we see these instructions for elders. He says this saying is trustworthy. If anyone aspires to be an overseer, remember overseer also means elder or pastor, he desires a noble work. An overseer, therefore, must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, self-controlled, sensible, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not an excessive drinker, not a bully, but gentle, not quarrelsome, not greedy. He must manage his own household completely and have his children under control with all dignity. For if anyone does not know how to manage his own household, how will he take care of God's church? He must not be a new convert, or he might become conceited and incur the same condemnation as the devil. Furthermore, he must have a good reputation among outsiders, so that he does not fall into disgrace in the devil's trap. So those are the instructions Paul gives Timothy as he's selecting elders for the church in Ephesus. And then when he gives instructions to Titus, you'll see that there's a lot of similarities between the 2 lists. Let's see what he says to him in Titus chapter 1, verses 5 through 9. The reason I left you in Crete was to set right what I left undone, and as I directed you, to appoint elders in every town. An elder must be blameless, the husband of one wife, with faithful children who are not accused of wildness or rebellion. An overseer, so see we have elder and overseer both in the same passage here, of God's household, he must be blameless, not arrogant, not hot-tempered, not an excessive drinker, not a bully, not greedy for money, but hospitable, loving what is good, sensible, righteous, holy. Remember that word holy means set apart, different. Self-controlled, holding to the faithful messages taught, so that he will be able to both encourage with sound teaching and to refute those who contradict it. These are the instructions that are given in the New Testament for what is expected of someone who is to serve as an elder in the church. Now, if you look at these passages, there's a couple things that jump off the page first. First off, there's a very, very short list of abilities in these passages. They must be able to teach, and they must be able to manage their own household. That's the abilities list. But there is a very lengthy list of character qualities that are expected. Self-controlled, sensible, hospitable, gentle, not hot-tempered, not arrogant. And the list goes on and on and on. These are the things that God requires of someone who aspires to be a pastor or an elder. So then let's take a look at what the leadership structure actually looks like. And like I said, you all have been experiencing something very similar to that here as we've been leading and guiding the church. So in the leadership structure in an elder-led church, the church is led by multiple elders, never just one. It's led by multiple elders. And when we look in the New Testament passages, especially in the book of Acts, but in some of Paul's letters as well, when he gives instructions to appoint elders in a place, it's always plural. Appoint elders, not appoint an elder. Right? So in the church, an elder-led church is not just the pastor as the final say on everything. There is a group of elders that works together to lead and guide the church. Now, in some churches, it's only the pastors or elders. And if you go to, say, Westminster Baptist Church, they have 2 pastors. They're trying to fill a 3rd position right now. They are the elders. They are the ones that lead and guide the church. A lot of my background comes in non-denominational churches, and in a lot of non-denominational churches, the elder board is consisted of staff pastors and also volunteers from within the congregation that are ordained to serve as elders as well. They're not staff, they're not getting paid any money, they're not pursuing pastoral ministry, but they're serving as an elder at that church to help lead and guide and shepherd the people. Now, in an elder-led church model, the senior pastor is what I would call a first among equals. Right, so he's the one that has been assigned to lead and guide and direct the church, and he's the one that's coming before God and seeking God's wisdom and guidance for where to go. The senior pastor is usually the one that has kind of a lot of the vision and direction for where the church is going. But when you sit down in an elder meeting, the senior pastor sits down at a table with the other elders, and he's just one vote out of a group of people. Every elder gets a vote, including the pastor, and it's one equal vote for each person. So in an elder-led church, so they are the ultimate authority for the church. The elders are the ones that are responsible for the church and to lead and guide the people. Now, just because they're the ultimate authority for the church doesn't mean they make every single decision. In fact, it's not healthy if the elders make every single decision. No, they can delegate authority to whoever they want, but ultimately they're still responsible even if they've delegated the authority. I'll give you two examples. I'll give you one from my work life at Milby back when I was working there, and I'll give you another one from here at church. So at Milby, for many years I served as the operations manager, and my direct report was the owner and president of the company, Bernie. And so Bernie, over time, granted me increasing amounts of authority as the operations manager. One of the things I was responsible for is hiring the people under me, the people at headquarters and also the people at the remote branches that I was in charge of. And so I would come in and they would do an initial interview with me, and then if the initial interview went well, they would do an interview with a second interview with Bernie and myself. And then after they left, the two of us would sit down and we would decide if the person was the right one to hire. Over time, he became increasingly confident in my ability to be able to discern this. And so we got to the point where he was no longer involved in the hiring process. I would do an initial interview. I would do a second interview with myself and someone else, maybe like a department that they were going to be placed in, a department head. And then I had the ultimate authority to make that decision. I had the authority to hire. I had the authority to fire. I had the authority to set up new vendor contracts. I had the authority to say, we're not going to deal with this vendor anymore. The more I worked for him, the more and more responsibility he gave me. Now, at the same time, he was the president of the company. He's ultimately responsible. If I just go firing good people, he's going to make some changes, right? He's going to step in and say, no, I've granted you authority, but you've gone too far. We're going to do something different. If I'm doing a poor job of managing, he can step in because ultimately he is over me. He is the authority of the company, and he has a responsibility to every employee that works there that the company does well so that they continue to have a job there. And so in that place, I've been delegated authority, but ultimately Bernie is the one that's responsible for what happens in the company. And we tried to function similarly here as well. Like the leadership team works like a board of elders, and they are the ones that are ultimately responsible for the decisions, but we delegate authority as well. Think, for example, of our care team. That's one of the places we've delegated a lot of authority. So the care team, their mission is to love on the people of this church, and then that was their original mission, and they came back and said, that's too narrow. We also want to be able to love on the people outside of the church. So we said, okay, you have authority to love on the people outside the church as well. You have a budget, you have money to work with, and you have pretty much free reign to interpret what it means to love on the people of the church. They didn't ask us permission to send out cards to people. That's something they came up with on their own. They didn't need permission from the leadership team for us to adopt a family for Christmas this past year. That's a decision they were able to make on their own. All the different things they do, they're granted authority to do that because the leadership team is not going to make every single decision that happens. And if they do, the church just doesn't function well. We function better because we have a care team that has the authority to make decisions. We have an outreach team that has the authority to make decisions. We grant authority to different people in different groups and teams so that things get done better and so that we've got the people with the heart for what they want to do in the right place so they can do those very things. Now, how are elders selected? Okay, so by and large, senior pastor outside of the Methodist Church is elected by the congregation. Okay, so pretty much any kind of elder-led church, the congregation holds a vote and they vote whether or not they're going to hire a senior pastor, kind of like what we did here. But within the church, how are elders elected? Same thing, they are voted on by the church. And there's usually two different methods churches use. One Methodist churches will have a nominating committee, and the nominating committee will look at the slate of eligible men in the church and say these are the eligible men, and the nominating committee will try to look at the passages in 1 Timothy 3, Titus chapter 1, and say, okay, out of the men we have that are eligible in this church, because usually you have to have gone to the church for a certain amount of time, they say, oh, which ones of these do we think meet these character qualities? Who are the ones we think we should bring before the congregation? And then they bring a recommendation to the congregation votes, and your elders are elected. In some other churches, and this is how we did it in Grace, we didn't do it through a nominating committee. The elder board would make recommendations to the congregation to bring another elder on. And so the elder board would, like if we had someone rotate off, we'd be like, okay, somebody's rotating off. Do we want to stay with the number we have? Or is there someone else in the church here that we think would be a good elder that would make a good shepherd for the people here? And then that name, once again, would be brought before the church, and ultimately the church votes. So in an elder-led model, the senior pastor and the elders are elected by the congregation. The congregation holds a vote, and then the congregation trusts those men to shepherd and guide the church. How do those men earn that trust? They earn it by exemplifying the character qualities that are required of an elder. Because nobody wants a hot-tempered shepherd to guide them. No one wants to be pastored by a bully or a drunk, someone with no self-control, and someone with no common sense. The responsibility is huge, and the level of trust required for the church to function properly is big as well. That is why God has put such a high character quality standard for those that he would have serve as elders. So because it takes trust and respect for the church to function well. Now, it doesn't mean that the congregation blindly follows whatever the elders say. In a healthy elder-led church, every single member of the congregation has every right to go to any elder and bring up a concern or an idea that they think needs to go before the church or needs to go before the leadership of the church. I can tell you that sometimes at Grace, we would sit down in our meetings, and there would be items on our agenda for that elder meeting that were something that was brought up by some member of the congregation. And we've had the same thing here too. Now we're a little smaller, more informal, so there have been times like I had a request a few weeks ago, can we make a change so that we don't have as many stand-up and sit-downs during the service? And that just took a text with me and the leadership team, be like, hey, this was brought up, I think it's a good idea, what does everybody think? And we came up with it and said, yes, we're good. So we changed the order of service, one less stand-up and sit-down. Right? Some other times we've got items on our monthly agenda that are things that have been brought up by the congregation so that we can talk through them and try to seek God's will for what to do. So that's kind of how it's structured. But once again, the elders are the ones that are ultimately responsible for the health of the church before God. They are the ones that are ultimately answerable before God one day as far as how they led and guided the congregation. So in short, in an elder-led church, the church is led by a group of elders, not just one. In an elder-led church, there's no separation of the sacred and the secular. All areas are under their leadership. Elders delegate authority in order to utilize the giftings of others and so that they don't burn themselves out. In delegating authority, they don't have every single decision run by them. They grant broad levels of authority to different people. They empower deacons, committees, teams, or individuals to make very important decisions for the church. And ultimately, they have the authority to step in, and if someone is abusing what the authority has been given to them, they have the right to step in and try to rein things back in and bring it back in the direction that things should go. The congregation elects the elders. They vote for proposed bylaws changes, and they vote for the budget each year in most elder-led models. So the things that tend to come before the congregation are election of the leaders, voting for bylaw changes, and voting on the budget each year. That's usually about it that gets decided at the congregational level. And in a healthy church, the elders don't operate as authoritarians. I mean, we can all think of examples of where power has been abused in different places, but in a healthy church, they don't. Because the character qualities required of an elder are supposed to shape him into a gentle servant leader who will model Jesus' sacrificial love for his congregation. That's what they're designed to do. Sometimes the wrong people are put in the position of pastor or elder, which is why basically every elder-led church out there has some form or mechanism to remove a pastor or an elder if needed, if somebody has gone too far and gone in a direction they should not. Now, our current elderish model of church is designed to function this way. The leadership team oversees and shepherds the congregation, and we delegate authority as needed. We delegate authority to the care team. We delegate authority to the outreach team, to the prayer team. We delegate authority to the treasurer, to our worship team. They don't have to run their songs by us, right? The worship team has the freedom to pick the songs they're using. They have the freedom to go with the style of worship music they want to do. And we delegate authority to those who come up here and preach. Everyone who comes up here to preach has a topic they've agreed to, but we don't micromanage what they say about the topic. We trust that they know what they're doing. I'm always available to anyone that speaks here as a resource if they have questions, but we grant them broad authority in putting together their message to share with the congregation. Now, looking back, as a leadership team, could we have delegated more? Yes, certainly. And some of that's on me. If you look at my management style throughout my 22 years at Milby, I have a tendency to be very, very conscientious to not put too much on anyone that works in my department, right? Like I don't want to burn my people out. And so I have a tendency to delegate to a certain extent, and then I'm like, oh, this is going to be too much for them. I'll just do that myself. So like I know that I have this tendency. I have to fight in myself in my management style, and it's done with good intention, but I know that sometimes I can end up having too much on my plate. And so looking back, I'm sure there are things as a congregation this past year where our leadership team could have done a better job of delegating even more authority than we have. But in contrast, many of you come out of a Methodist church structure where the pastor deals with the spiritual and the ad council deals with the secular. The pastor is a temporary employee, and the ad council are the ones that actually run the church. And I've had multiple people here tell me in the last few months that in the Methodist church, some people view the pastor as their employee rather than as their shepherd, which was really eye-opening for me because I haven't come out of an experience like that anywhere. So when you look at Rock and Refuge Church and you see me involved in all kinds of things that would have been reserved for the ad council maybe in the church where you were before, I can see how my level of involvement could be mistaken for an attempt to try to control everything. But please understand, that's not what I'm trying to do. I am not trying to be a controlling dictator running his own little empire here. Honestly, if I wanted to be, no, we won't, okay. So, so in 2015, when I worked at Milby Company, the ownership came to us and said they wanted to transition ownership to several people in the company, and I was one of them. There was a team of 5 of us that they wanted to transition ownership to, and the current owners and the team unanimously wanted me to be the president of the company. And so I was offered the position of president of Milby. It seemed like the next logical step in my career. I had kind of worked the ladder all the way up, and I got to the point where, okay, I'm going to own this company, and I get to be the president of the company and run it. And as we started to go through the process and started to transition, something happened. There was a relationship with a coworker I had there, and that relationship was starting to deteriorate very rapidly as I moved closer and closer to becoming owner. And I got to a point where I realized if I become owner and president of this company, this relationship is going to be irreparable. So I turned down the raise, I turned down the money, I turned down the position, and I said, no, I'm going to stay here, but I'm not going to be the president of the company. I'm not even going to own the company. I'm going to stay on as an employee. I did that to protect a relationship that was really important to me. If I had a controlling bent to me that really wanted to run an empire, like I would have taken the president of a multi-million-dollar plumbing supply house job in a heartbeat. But I didn't because that wasn't what was important to me. What was more important was maintaining a relationship with a coworker that I valued very much. So I want you to understand that if the congregation wants to move away from an elder-led church model and adopt a more Methodist leadership type structure, I will fully support it. Let me say that again. If the congregation wants to move to a more Methodist style leadership structure, I will fully support it. I will not pastor it, at least not long term. You see, just like I shared this past July, I will take it as a sign that my role here is temporary to help get the church up and running and ready and hand it off to the next pastor that God has already put in place for them. I'll operate within the Methodist structure in the meantime and trust that we will find someone else, whether we go independent and find a more Methodist-leaning minister, or whether a congregation decides to join the GMC and work with them to have a minister assigned to the congregation. It's not because I'm power hungry. It's because just like I shared with the congregation last July, my study of Scripture has led me to believe firmly that the scriptural model for church leadership is a male elder-led church. And so while I can help a church move forward, I can't be the long-term pastor of a church that isn't either there or moving in that direction. And once again, this church has got to be bigger than any one person. And honestly, that was my original intention when I came here. My original intention was not to take a group of Methodists and make them run an elder-led church model. The whole reason I came was to help get the church up and running because I thought it was a foregone conclusion that the congregation was going to want to join the Global Methodist Church. I found out quickly that wasn't the case, and God had his way of doing things. But ultimately, I want to follow whatever God's plan is for this congregation. So God had different plans than I thought originally, and I adjusted. And now it appears that he might have different plans again, and I'm willing to adjust again. Because as Job said in Job chapter 1, verse 21, the Lord gives, and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And I want to build a church here that outlasts all of us. We want to build a church that goes on for generations. When we are all gone celebrating in heaven, we want Rock and Refuge Church to still be continuing. And it needs to be bigger than any one person. And I will not try to force a group of Methodists into an elder-led church model if they're not comfortable with it. So what we're doing next week we're having our meeting where we're going to be able to go through questions, and you're also going to have the opportunity to elect the people that are going to help to shape and drive what we do for our next leadership structure. So what I've asked is, I reached out to my friend Matt Sickle, many of you know Reverend Matt Sickle, and I asked if he would be willing to come next week and preach for us, explain a little bit more about Methodist church structure, because at this point, not all of you here are Methodist either. And so those of you that don't come out of that, I want you to understand the structure, the why behind it, how it works, and why it's done. And then also to explain a little bit about the Global Methodist Church that he's been a part of for the last couple of years now, and be able to share what kinds of things they could do to help our congregation if we decided we wanted to go that route. Originally, he accepted this, and then later on, he came back to me and he said, Jess reminded me, I have a family commitment that I cannot get out of. So what he's done is he's arranged Pastor Thaddeus Sales, who is the presiding elder for his region. He pastors out of Dillsburg, Pennsylvania. He is going to come down. He is going to share a message with us next week to speak to these things. As I spoke to Pastor Thaddeus the other night, I asked him how he wanted to kind of structure it, and I told him what we were doing, kind of where we were. And he said what he prefers to do is have the congregation get together questions for him. He said, if you can collect the questions and then get them to me, and then he'll take his message and he'll structure it based off our questions. So basically, my email address is in every single bulletin, and it's in the church directory that Rini sends out to us. If you have any questions for him, if you can email them to me before Wednesday night, I'm going to send him an email Wednesday night with all the questions so that he has Thursday and Friday to prepare his message for us to try to go over those things. It can have to do with church structure. It can have to do with Methodist history. It can have to do with GMC. It can have to do with churches that have decided to stay independent, because he has some experience with that as well. Any questions you have, you can ask him. And his message will be geared toward answering those questions. He's also agreed to stay for our potluck dinner afterwards, so if you want to sit down with him and talk with him one-on-one afterward, he'll be here sharing a meal with us afterward, and you'll be able to talk to him there. And he's also agreed to stay for our congregational meeting afterward, so that if more questions come up, maybe sometimes, if somebody answers a question and you get two more, right? He'll be here and available to answer questions of the congregation during our congregational meeting as well. So he's basically dedicating his entire evening to us, because I wanted to make sure that this week I explained to you why I've been doing what I'm doing, and I want to make sure next week we get a very clear picture of Methodist church structure, how it works and why, and some of the ways that we could potentially move forward in that direction as a congregation. So I hope this serves to add clarity to some of the things where we once had confusion. My ultimate goal is for God's will to be done for this church, because unless the Lord builds the house, its builders labor over it in vain. I don't want to labor in vain, and I'm sure you don't want to either. So let's seek God together as a congregation and see where he leads us. Let's pray. God, I thank you. I thank you for this wonderful church body, God, for each and every person that calls Rock and Refuge Church home, whether they are an official member or whether they are just someone that comes every week and continually supports us. We are so grateful, God, that you have brought us together as a community and as a congregation. God, you have led us in a very specific direction for this time, and you have a direction planned out for us already going forward. God, I ask that you give us your wisdom now as we seek your guidance, as we seek to look to where our next steps are as a congregation. God, make it very, very clear to us as a congregation, and give us the courage and the ability to move forward in the direction that you have set for us. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.